Hello everyone, my name's Lachlan and today we will be talking about Moisture Plus. So Moisture Plus for me is a fantastic function. It's found in most Miele ovens, but not all of them. So I will talk about a way in which we can replicate this if your oven doesn't have the function. Moisture Plus is a function that we can use for roasting products, and generally the fattier the meat, the better it is for it. And also for products that need to rise when they cook. So things like your breads, your cakes, puff pastry, and anything along those lines. So today I'll go through Moisture Plus. I'll talk about how to set up the oven for it, when to use the moisture, and also how this benefits the food, because it's important to have a bit of context around using Moisture Plus so you are confident in using it. What I'm going to do today though is I'll demonstrate using Moisture Plus by baking a simple bread. So, bread's one of the key products that is beneficial in Moisture Plus. So this is a very simple bread that I'm cooking today. It's a no-knead bread, and the recipe can be found on mieleexperience.com.au, also mieleexperience.co.nz. In this bowl here, I've got 600 grams of flour. I've actually gone 400 of baker's flour, 200 of wholemeal, just because I am starting to prefer the flavour that wholemeal flour gives us. I've got 30 grams of olive oil or mils, about 7 grams of yeast thereabouts, that goes in, and 400 ml of water. So it's really important that this water is basically blood temperature. So when you pop your finger in it, it's just slightly warm without it being hot. If we have hot water, we risk killing the yeast. I also popped a pinch of salt in with this flour. So I've literally popped all of it in as you saw then. I'm going to pop it into my mix master with a paddle, not a dough hook, because I'm literally just going to mix this for 30 seconds or so until it's combined, and then I'll pop it into a bowl and we can prove it. So I'll get this mixing, I'll then show you the next steps. Okay, so it's been about 30 seconds, I've mixed this dough together, and the reason why I've used a paddle is it's very, very wet. So it's just in order to speed it up. Now you can do this with your hands also, that's completely fine, but I just find it easier in the Mixmaster. Now just grab that dough, and you can see it's quite sticky. I've popped that into an oiled bowl, and I'm going to pop this into the oven behind me, which I've set to the proving yeast dough setting. I'm going to prove this in total for about an hour, but every 15 to 20 minutes, I'll actually come back and fold this bread. So I'll show you what that means, and once it's proved, we'll shape it, and then we're almost ready to bake. So this goes in. Whilst that's proving, I'll bring you over to the oven and I'll actually talk about setting the oven up for Moisture Plus. So I'll show you all the controls, then we'll come back and talk about why it's good for your food and when to use it, all of those finer details. So setting your ovens up for Moisture Plus is very straightforward. Each oven is slightly different in its approach. So if your oven looks different to the one I'm using here today, please refer to your owner's manual and that will give you a step-by-step instruction as to how to do it. But I'm sure once you've done this once, you'll be very confident in doing it in the following times. So first of all, let's select turning the oven on, and then we can select our oven functions. So we'll select Moisture Plus, and you can see this oven here actually gives me 4 functions to choose from. So I have Moisture Plus with Auto Roast, Fan Plus, Intensive Bake, and Conventional. For the bread today, I will do Fan Plus. And now I need to pick my temperature. So normally you would use the same temperature that your recipe is calling for. So for example, if it said bake on 180 degrees fan forced, you would do the same thing on Moisture Plus. For the bread today, let's do 210 degrees. Continue. And now you can choose how you would like to inject the steam. So I have automatic, I have manual, and I have with a timer. So that's basically doing a time controlled burst. Now the automatic burst of steam, that will inject 1 burst when the oven reaches temperature. So this is fantastic if you're not preheating the oven and you're placing your food into the cold oven and it all cooks from scratch. However, if you are preheating the appliance, I would recommend that you do it manually or time controlled. When I do it time controlled, you can pick how much steam you like. So let's pretend we'll do 2 bursts. I'll just show you. And then you can pick how long or when you would like each burst to inject into the appliance. So you can see here timer 1 is in 1 minute. If I look at timer 2, that'll automatically change to 6 minutes. But you might say you want it to inject 10 minutes in. So you have full customization over when that happens. For me, with most of my cooking, I actually prefer to do this manually. But as I said, it's really up to you. For the bread, we will do 2. You can see that 3 there is the maximum, but 2 for the bread today is plenty. We will press continue. And now the appliance is asking us to hold a container with approximately 200 ml of water under the water intake pipe. So that is found in the top left-hand corner of the oven there. You will place your jug underneath or your glass of water. Just use tap water. I never measure how much water is in my jug. I just simply have an excess amount, place that underneath and select OK. So you can hear the pump running now. Once that pump stops, and you can also see it on the screen, that water is fully injected like so. I can now remove the jug, push that intake pipe back on in, close the door, and this oven will preheat. So I'm going to grab my gourmet baking stone, pop that into the oven so it can preheat along with the oven. My bread is not too far off, so I'll pop that in once it's ready. But you can see on the screen, I have a burst of steam option right there. Now, when my food goes into the oven, I'll simply press that burst of steam option and away we go. So it really is as simple as that. As I said, if your oven is slightly different, please refer to the manual. But once you've done this once, as I said, I've got no doubts that you'll be an expert with all those future occasions. So if we look back at a lot of traditional recipes for baking breads, for roasting, and other baked goods sort of along those lines, commonly you might see a step that suggests to add a ramekin of water to the oven, cook with a water bath, add some liquid to a tray and things like that. So this is a way that is basically replicating Moisture Plus, or perhaps Moisture Plus is replicating this method, depending how you look at it. So no longer do we have to physically add water to the appliance, which is fantastic. Moisture Plus is now doing that for us. However, some of you may have multiple ovens at home. Maybe one has got Moisture Plus and one doesn't, or you may have an oven that doesn't have Moisture Plus as a function. So to maximize your space cooking in a scenario like that, come over with me to the oven now. I'll quickly show you how I would replicate Moisture Plus in an oven that doesn't have it. It won't be exactly the same as everything I'll talk through shortly, but it will give you a benefit overall. So it's definitely worth knowing to do. Here I have a jug of boiling water, so it is important that we do use water from the kettle and nothing colder. But as I said, come with me and we'll talk through it. So let's create the scenario that we're baking something. Here I have the oven set to 180 degrees on Fan Plus, and let's say that you don't have Moisture Plus on your oven. Inside my oven, I have a baking rack and then a baking tray. So the rack I have positioned, as you can see there, on shelf level 2, and then I have a rack, or a tray I should say, on shelf level 1 beneath that. So basically, all I would do is place your food onto the rack whenever that's ready, and then come along with your boiling water, pour it into that tray. You can hear a slight sizzle. I wouldn't do any more than 300 mils, otherwise the steam will last for a little bit too long. But now this will create some steam into the oven, create that humidity, and you will get a benefit from that. As I said, it's not exactly the same, but it's a pretty close solution if you don't have the function. So now that we have seen how to set the oven up, I just want to re-clarify some points. So the maximum bursts that we can do is 3 bursts of steam. Each burst takes 5 minutes. So if you wanted to do these bursts back to back to back, the fastest you could do this would be across 15 minutes. Each burst is also approximately 100 mils, but the appliance will ask you to intake all of this water at the start, so you don't need to come back to the appliance numerous times throughout the cook, which makes it extremely easy. So there's 2 rules for Moisture Plus. The first rule is you always inject that steam as soon as the food enters the oven. So let's pretend I have a cake or a roast or anything like that. You pop it into the oven and you start that first burst straight away. The second rule is you always do the steam in the first half of cooking. So you simply get your total cooking time, chop that in half. This is where we need to remember that each burst takes 5 minutes. So it becomes very simple maths. If I am cooking something that takes 15 minutes, then obviously my one burst at the start is the only burst I do, because I can't fit another 5-minute block in that first half of cooking. If I'm cooking a roast chicken, for example, for 1 hour, this then gives me half an hour to do that burst of steam. So you might do one straight away, the second burst 10 minutes in, and the third burst 20 minutes in. I have done a lot of testing, and I don't think it really matters when you inject the steam, provided it is at the start in that first half of cooking. You can then do it at any stage that you like. So they are the two rules. As long as you do that, I know for sure that you will get excellent results. But also we need to talk about why this is beneficial for the food. So let's think about a cake first of all. So I'm sure you've baked a cake at home before, and there's a good chance one of two things has potentially happened. So first of all, it might have cracked in the center, and secondly, it may have peaked in the center. So sometimes it'll crack and peak, it'll rise up like a witch's hat. And this can happen for numerous reasons, but a few of the main reasons is, firstly, you might have placed that cake into too hot an oven, or secondly, you might have actually made this cake, it's sitting in a cake tin on your bench before you've preheated. Now in both scenarios, what happens to that cake is, let's pretend you've got that cake batter just sitting on the bench for 20 minutes when your oven's not ready, is a skin will form on top of the batter, just like skin forms on top of milk. Or if you've placed it into too hot an oven, once again, a skin will form on top. So potentially, in a worst case scenario, both of these has happened. It has sat on the bench for too long, and then it has gone into an oven that's too hot. So we get quite a tight skin on top of the cake. This can also occur for a bread as well. So then when the heat of the oven deals with the food and the food wants to rise, there's tension on top, and something is restricting this product from actually rising to its full capacity. So when there's a restriction, we look for the weakest point. And if we think about how a skin forms, it'll start on the edges, it'll work its way to the center. So the center is also always, I should say, the weakest point in the food. So that will crack, and then all the rising happens in the middle. And this is simply from a couple of simple mistakes. So that normal cake that you might normally cook, use your same temperature, same time, but if we place that into the oven with Moisture Plus, inject that burst of steam as soon as it enters the appliance, this creates a really humid cavity. This makes the initial phase very difficult to form that crust, so your dough or your batter stays quite pliable, and it assists that product to rise to its best capabilities in that initial phase. So this will give you much better cakes, cupcakes, muffins, breads, anything that rises, Moisture Plus will benefit, and you can really play around with how much steam. There still is an element of trial and error on your behalf. Some cakes, one burst of steam is perfect, some require 2, some require 3. So your first one may not be 100% how you like it, but I guarantee you your first one on Moisture Plus will most likely be better than the one not on Moisture Plus. So you'll see a benefit there. When we look at a roast, essentially, as I said before, the fattier the meat, the more beneficial Moisture Plus is for that product. So let's think about humidity just quickly. You might have one day where it's 25 degrees outside, 0% moisture, or humidity I should say, and it's perfect conditions essentially. Then the next day you might have 25 degrees with 100% humidity. And even though the temperature is the same, it feels a lot hotter. So the feels like temperature basically increases. So when we have days like that and it feels hotter for us, typically as a person we sweat more. That's how we deal with that heat. So if we think about an oven just quickly, if we have a normal oven with no moisture, it's going to be quite a dry cavity. As soon as we add some moisture into that cavity, it becomes quite humid. So the meat will basically sweat the same like a human would, and when that happens, more fat is rendering out of the product. This can help in a number of reasons. First of all, it's rendering out that excess fat Fat is basically an oil, and oil is a conductor of heat. So this will mean you'll get more even colour, so you get really, really nice looking products. You will also get more pan juices. So if you're one to make a gravy or a sauce at the end, you'll have more to work with. It's going to break down more sinews and all those gristly pieces of fat that you normally have within the product. So quite often you might carve a meat and there's certain aspects that you can't eat, whereas this steam helps to break it down and you get quite a nice gelatinous mouthfeel. So you are in some ways getting more of a yield. Because you're rendering out more fat, technically you could say it's healthier. That's something that personally I don't mind, but it is a technical byproduct from it. So basically we have a few different things happening here which sets up some really good foundations for a great roast product. Now whilst it's great for your meat, it's not necessarily great for your vegetables. And when we think about roasting vegetables, a vegetable is composed mainly of water. And when we're wanting to crisp up a vegetable, to crisp it up you have to get rid of the water. And that's why quite often when you're roasting vegetables in your oven, you will have a lot of moisture expel into the cavity. And when you open the door, lots of steam, leaves the cavity also. So obviously water is leaving the vegetable in order for them to crisp up. So if we add water to the cavity, that's going to be, not the best for those vegetables. So you might have situations where you are wanting to roast your meat and vegetables simultaneously. And this is where I would pop your meat in by itself initially. And even if you can only give that one burst of steam because your vegetables are going to take a similar time, one burst is definitely better than nothing. So you would give that food its burst of steam, wait 5 to 10 minutes and then place in a tray of vegetables and you can cook as normal. But as I said, if you are able to give the food the most moisture possible in that first half of cooking, that's ideal. But I guarantee if one person gives their roast chicken 1 burst, the other gives it 3 bursts, that won't mean that one is bad and one is great. They'll both be very, very good and both will be exceptional, probably better than the way you've cooked them in the previous times. This is very similar to those old roasting recipes that you might see where you place a tray of water in the oven or something. So it's exactly the same and I would really recommend that you give this a go. So they are the 2 rules. Once you break it down like that, hopefully it's very simple and I have no doubt that a lot of your everyday cooking at home, you'll be able to tackle with Moisture Plus. Okay, so this dough has now had its first 20 minutes and it's rising quite quickly. Now we're going to fold the bread. So you simply pick up that dough and just droop it over the top. Now do this on all 4 sides and what will happen is it'll start to form sort of a ball. This one I'll actually have to do 5 just so I can encase it all. So I've drooped it over like this. I'm now just going to pick that up, just carefully, and place it seam side down. So when you do this, try and retain all the bubbles. Don't knock out too much air. Keep folding it. This is going to develop more gluten, give you nice structure in the bread. As I said, we'll do this 3 times, so 2 more times, and then we can shape it and cook it off. So that's all you have to do. The bread will get smoother as you go. That's it. Okay, so it's been an hour. I've given this bread 3 folds and you can see that we've got a really nice, quite a large looking dough now. So it's a lot smoother in how it looks. It's proven nicely, so this is very active. We have lots of nice bubbles in there. I'm just going to dust some flour onto my bench now because we're going to shape this. So I'm just going to upend that just carefully because I want to retain a lot of those bubbles. I'm just going to sprinkle a bit on my hands as well. You can sort of let this fall. So I'm just going to push this out. I'm retaining the bubbles, but I'm pushing it out. Going to fold that over like so. I'll then give it another fold that way, another fold that way, one like that, then a third that way. So I've got that. Now just create some tension on the outside by using your pinkies and dragging this along the bench. So we've got a pretty good looking loaf there. We can see the ends there. They're not perfect, but that's okay. So what I've got here, I have just actually a steam tray, although the back side of an egg carton's got a really nice shape. I've popped a tea towel into that, and I've also sprinkled some flour into that tea towel. I'm just going to sit that in like so. I'm just going to pinch this dough together now actually, just so it's connected. You might need to sort of fold it together like so. I'm going to pop this back into the oven to prove. This should only take roughly 20 minutes or so, I think, until it doubles. I've got a gourmet baking stone in the oven preheating. So once this has risen completely, I'll then pop it into the oven. We'll bake it on Moisture Plus and we'll have some really nice crispy bread. Okay, so the bread is all proved. I've got it onto my paddle now and I'm just about to place it onto our gourmet baking stone. So as I did before, the oven's on at 210 degrees with 2 bursts of steam. So I'm going to simply slide this onto the stone. Perfect. I'm doing my first burst now, so immediately. I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, I will do my second burst of steam, and then I'll bake it for a further 15 to 20 minutes or so. So this will help us to achieve a really nice rise, quite a nice crust as well, and we'll have a very nice bread at the end. So I trust that this video helps you out with Moisture Plus and gives you more confidence to use it in lots of your everyday cooking. If you would like to see some Moisture Plus recipes, you can hop onto mieleexperience.com.au or mieleexperience.co.nz, and there's a heap there that you'll be able to put into action at home and get some fantastic results. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.